The expenditure by national and provincial government amounted to 25 billion rand. However, he says there has been a marginal improvement in the audit outcomes of government departments. Joining us in studio is the Auditor General Kimi Makwetu, who is concerned about the slow pace of maintaining clean audit outcomes. It's good to have you in studio. Thanks very, very much for joining us.
Good morning.
What do you believe is of concern about the slow pace of clean audits?
When you receive recommendations from auditors as leadership of an institution, if you don't act fast enough, those areas of control weakness that the auditors are highlighting tend to continue into the future, and they contribute towards inefficient and ineffective methods of expenditure. And that's why you find that in most instances money will be spent and finished, but what was intended to be achieved with it is still not in place. And it is in that context that we say there's got to be swift action by leadership to reverse the situation.
Yeah, and you know, it seems to be an ongoing trend. I mean, I remember sitting in the same position the same time last year talking about the same thing. I mean, in a nutshell, if we look at it, irregular expenditure is basically money spent without complying with the law. And the amount of money that's been spent without complying with the law is 25.7 billion rand. That is completely unacceptable. I mean, think of what we can do with that money. I mean, what needs to be done? We keep talking about it, but we keep falling deeper into the trap.
I guess, Leanne, it's also important to recognize that some of the things that ought to have been done with that money, if you look at the 25.7 billion, have indeed been done, in the sense that we have traced back to see if you have indeed received that which you were buying. But what we are highlighting in it as well is that there will also be instances where that receipt of goods may not necessarily have happened because nobody is able to supervise the full effect of the transaction. So it's not really the full 26 billion having been washed down the tube, as it were. However, we are highlighting areas within that expenditure that potentially contribute to creating an environment where fraud and corruption could be perpetuated. And that's really to that extent, because once that finds a root and is entrenched, it then tends to deviate from what government is putting this money for expenditure towards.
Yeah, I mean, when you break it down, of the 30 entities, only 3 got a clean audit. Which are those 3? Let's highlight the good ones first.
If you look at which 30, the 30 within the sector of education, health and public works.
Indeed, yeah.
It will be public works in the Free State, there will be education in the Western Cape, and also roads and transport in the Western Cape. Yeah. So if you look at that sector, these will be the 3.
Those are the 3. But when we break it down, those are the most concerning sectors for you.
As it were, because if you look at the whole sector of education, health and public works, that's where the delivery of education relies on. It relies on the effective expenditure of those funds. Health as well, in terms of delivery of medicines, as well as maintenance of services in clinics, hospitals and everywhere. But at the same time, more importantly, with public works, they are the sector within government that presides over asset management as well as the delivery of infrastructure. So if you look at the total budget for those 3 across the whole country, it comes to about close to 37% of the national expenditure. So that's a significant sector, both in terms of its importance and the things that are expected to be delivered, as well as the extent of funds that are invested in that area.
Yeah.
So we're highlighting it from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think while you were announcing this, and one of the big issues that you brought up is the lack of leadership in stemming this problem. And that, I imagine, is what is needed at a time like this.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And if you look at the model of governance and oversight in government, people who design and develop policy are leadership. When that policy gets implemented, it's normally delegated to administrative staff under the guidance of a head of department or accounting officer. Now, when things don't work according to what was planned, that's why we are focusing the attention on leadership to say those plans that you had designed, which you meant to be achieved with the money that's being spent, are not being achieved, and therefore we call on you to act on that situation.
Yeah, which is of all importance. But something that's even more important is something. It seems that a lot of things are recurring over and over. And I know we touched on education as the sector, but in particular, let's have a look at Limpopo, because this is the department, the Limpopo Education Department, retained its disclaimed audit outcome. What is going on there? What's going wrong?
The basic disciplines of administrative and financial control are not being observed. The implementation of projects that have been identified is not done with the requisite discipline. Now, after we reported this and we put an emphasis on Limpopo, because within the sector of education, health and public works, Limpopo is the only province education department that has achieved negative outcomes. And I'm sure that as you have read the audit report, you would have seen also yesterday there was an announcement by an appeal court on matters pertaining to education in Limpopo. So there comes another source of assurance in terms of the evidence of the depth of the issues within that department in Limpopo. Yeah. So there's acknowledgement that the leadership is not pulling through and is not doing what's expected of them.
Yeah. Just finally, I mean, we always keep asking for solutions, and we have something in place called the Hawks, and I know you spoke about that yesterday as well in releasing it, basically saying that the Hawks, which were meant to be independent, were failing in their mandate of investigating corruption and other priority crimes, which is a travesty in itself, because this is what we need to try and combat the situation. I mean, just some recommendations as well. What do we do going forward?
Typically, when an audit report arises, Leanne, and we call on leadership to act, what we are in essence saying is that there's a combination of things that could be going wrong in an institution. It could be somebody who is implementing or doing something incompetently because they were put in a position without the requisite competencies, or it could be somebody who is deliberately deviating from these controls to achieve their own different objective. Once an audit report has been issued, it's incumbent upon the leadership to find those law enforcement agencies to further go deeper into the issues. Currently, it's not happening, and that's what we say when we say consequences must attach. And also, if somebody does not have the requisite competencies, there's no point in them being kept in that job because they're going to achieve the same result anyway.
All right, let's leave it there for this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. The Auditor General, Kimi Makwetu, talking to us about these results that were released yesterday of irregular expenditure by national and provincial government amounting to around 26 billion rand. All right, let's take a break here on the